Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our new time and our new title. We're going to pivot from the title since we pivoted with the time. I think that a title like How to Capitalize on User Testing Data might be a more precise title, and in discussion with our panelists, we're going to go in that direction most likely. Our agenda is basically, I'm first going to introduce the panelists and ask each of them to speak to their own company initiatives and their relationship with data as they talk a little bit about themselves. After that, we're going to go more into a discussion on user testing data, the kinds of metrics that each of them are exploring and using, and how that can be used potentially to increase ROI, but more so, I think, to understand the user better of the VR product that they're developing. So I will begin first with Tony.
Hi, my name's Tony Bevilacqua. I'm the founder and CEO of Cognitive VR. We're a Vancouver-based company focused on analytics for extended realities. So that's typically encompasses virtual, augmented, and mixed reality situations. We have a plugin that sits inside the experience, and we collect a lot of data on what's going on inside of the immersive world, and we provide those visualizations back to our customers. That typically might end up in the hands of other types of companies that are interested in garnering and gaining access to that data.
Great, thank you. And Brian Roth.
Yeah, my name is Brian Roth. I'm with Immersv, Inc. We are a San Francisco-based company. We are focused on the mobile VR space, as well as the non-VR space. We are a content distribution and monetization platform for developers and advertisers. We are looking at metrics and data around consumer interaction with ads specifically, and we are looking to kind of, we're utilizing 360 and VR, and we're looking to kind of be a bridge from the broader smartphone audience and how we can bring them into VR.
Great, thank you. And finally, Elizabeth Barron.
Hi, I do immersive, virtual, and augmented reality for product development. And product development is a broad brush, and we look at engineering, we look at design. So we're actually bringing together in the immersive environment people who have an artistic and creative bent to them, and that's their job. And we're asking them in the immersive environment to talk to a hardcore engineer who's used to dealing with Excel spreadsheets. And we're bringing them together because we're creating an immersive environment that allows the all that data that each of those disciplines can relate to be brought together so that an engineer can explain the structural integrity of a vehicle in the context of a beautiful, compelling design that's properly colored and shaded and represented in a lot of different circumstances. So the big benefit is that we have the ultimate communication tool in my mind to allow us to talk about the current state of our vehicle health at any point in our process.
Great, thank you. So what I'd like to get into with each of you is just a discussion on the type of data that you contend with and how that informs, in your case, Elizabeth, product design, ultimately, at the end of the pipeline. So how that data relates to the ultimate end user of your products, and see where we go from there in terms of user testing. So would you like to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So I think the fascinating thing is what immersion does is it brings the customer into the evaluation. So we have a very clear direction that what we're evaluating, if we're looking at the vehicle, it has to be a perspective that the customer could see. So we don't let you roll and tumble a model around and get abstracted in some place that a person couldn't actually view. So what that does is it brings that customer back into the heart of the design. And then we are working to increase the amount of experiential data that we get, which is like a new direction. So instead of just like cutting a section through the live data, now we're looking and asking questions about why and what would your experience be if you were in that vehicle. and we're trying to carry that through our whole product development process. So that is a really exciting way of getting a lot of data and continuing to bring it back to what the customer's experience would be. And immersion is like the perfect paradigm for that.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so, and in terms of data and data collection, I'm glad you touched on that, because in that experiential data that you collect, I guess, is it a lot of it qualitative, and how does that translate into metrics? Because we're going to jump into metrics after this with Tony. So,
Yeah,
so
absolutely, yeah. So we need to understand our customers in qualitative and quantitative ways, and we need objective and subjective metrics that will allow us to decide when and what we should do. So sometimes it has happened where a customer tells us one thing, but they really want something else. So we need to have good data and good trends in order to understand. So we do a lot of market research and, and clinic work and stuff, and then we bring that back in, and we use the wisdom that we get from those trials, along with our knowledge of vehicle development, to kind of bring things together. But if we in the immersive space, if we can't get good data, if we can only look at it and then say, it's not as powerful as if we can get the full experience that somebody is having in the immersed environment.
Okay, great. So let's jump to data type. Let's jump to metrics a little bit. And Tony, maybe you could speak a little bit to the types of metrics that are trackable with the products that you offer, and maybe give some examples of precise metrics too for everyone here.
Yeah, so I'll give you the rundown. The things that we focus on are really experiential. So if you think about the way that data has been collected typically on mobile devices and other types of platforms going forward, we've been interested in what people tap on, how they move through an experience, move through a funnel. And a lot of the data is really being focused on event-based telemetry, how many people did this, and what properties did that data have. I think when you think about immersive experiences, you need to kind of turn the picture, or turn the data analysis on its head. I think that the context of 3D space is a very important aspect of everything that's going on inside the overall environment. So when we talk about visualization before collection, it's really about visualizing the data within the space that was collected, so we can garner the insights and the context of what was going on within that space and that world. So we collect a lot of information on gaze in terms of what people are looking at, and we do it in two different ways. We do it through standard kind of low-budget headsets that we track the center point and accurate head rotation of what somebody's doing. We also support retinal trackers, which give you more accurate pupil-based insights into what people are looking at with a high degree of accuracy. We also collect data on how somebody moves through a space. So if you have some sort of environment that the user is engaging with and they're moving around inside of room scale, we track that. But we also track teleportations and other types of virtual paths that people take through spaces. Event-based telemetry, but within a spatial context, right? So you kind of think of that as like a Google kind of street view with data layered on top of it. So where did things happen, right? So if somebody picks up an item, makes a purchase, takes their headset off, the context of where that happened is very important to the insights that are being garnered, right? If somebody takes their headset off, there's a good why. We want to understand the why, right? So those are kind of the main insights. The last piece that I'd probably touch on is the biometrics. And I think that we spend a lot of time thinking about this problem as well, especially on consumer and closed research, being able to ingest different types of physiological states of customers, and ultimately kind of getting to the promised land of being able to understand and map emotion, an emotional response to a particular product or experience.
And how is that captured?
So right now, we have an SDK sits inside of the engine. There's a lot of different sensors. Basically on all the consumer headsets, there's no sensors at all in terms of biometrics, but there is opportunities to add galvanic skin response, heart rate, respiration, perspiration. You throw all that into into charts and graphs within the experience, and looking from the user's first-person view, you can garner a lot of insights in terms of the user's physical response to the content that they're seeing.
Great. Yeah. Wow, that's pretty amazing, the layers that you can grab. Now, so metrics, Brian, what's important for immersive?
Yeah, we are, in its most simplistic form,
Really seen as an ad platform. And some of the things that we're looking at is we work with a lot of smaller independent developers. Archaeact is a partner of ours as well. But when these content creators are considering a free-to-experience model or free-to-play model, one of the monetization opportunities is ads, love it or hate it. I love it, of course, but and advertisers, obviously thinking about how can they integrate into new consumer mediums or engage in new platforms where consumers are spending time. So a lot of times we're trying to match traditional media metrics with kind of new metrics, and we're looking at things such as we know that consumers are thirsty for more 360 or VR content, and that's based on the view-through rate or completion rate of ad experiences that we're seeing, which is exponentially higher than kind of the traditional metrics that you see in other mediums, whether it's browser-based environments on a desktop or laptop, or mobile metrics for video on a phone.
Right.
The completion rate, click-through rate, et cetera, that you see on a phone, a standard video, as opposed to a 360 experience is night and day.
Can you talk through that process? Because I know on your site you also talk about it publicly. So you're saying that there's definitely an increase in percentage compared to other media.
Yeah, I mean we see on average the completion rate for a 360 video spot, 15 to 30 seconds, is anywhere from 70 to 80% of people are completing that, and we see anywhere from 20 to 30% of consumers are then clicking on that or engaging further. Whereas, on traditional desktop or mobile, you're seeing in the low double digits, in the teens, if that, maybe call it a 10% completion rate and a 1% click-through rate, and that's probably, giving the benefit of the doubt there. So we're seeing consumers that are very hungry for content. They enjoy this, and we're seeing a lot more interaction with consumers. And this is also trying to tie into what advertisers have been looking at in terms of what is post-click engagement. What is the cost to acquire a customer, and how many people are engaging after a click. Kind of further downstream, or as Tony says, down funnel activity. So. Those are the kind of metrics that we're looking at. We're also working with developers on, where is the best placement for an ad? If you're going to put it, is it opt-in? Is it forced, et cetera?
Okay.
How is that affecting the engagement of consumers with their content? So those are the kind of things that we're looking at and focused on.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So in this territory of because I know we've all had discussions about this. I think in your case, Elizabeth, at Ford, it's more clear. We collect data for this purpose, and it informs the design team, potentially the product design team. So I want to get into that a little, but I want to talk a little more generally in terms of, with Tony and with Brian, is how is the data that the systems that you are providing in place to collect data for developers and content creators to review that data, how is it informing design, or is it? Are you finding feedback from developers and content creators, and how is that relationship developing? Do you have that type of information for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's our entire value proposition, so I think it's an important aspect. If I think about use cases and how people use the technology today, it usually kind of funnels under the umbrella of consumer research, right? So being able to understand people and how they're engaging with content, and that can map across a variety of industries. We started in the games and entertainment space, and we found a lot of value in applying the learnings and capabilities that we had created to be able to apply to enterprise, right? So spending more times in product development types of use cases across manufacturing, retail, is where we're seeing a lot of value. And the way that we've had to create visualization tools that are built from the ground up, and we're continuing to learn the best way to be able to demonstrate that value in an easy to consume way. The tools that we have today are very qualitative in data consumption. So we visualize all the data for you, and then it's you have to come up with conclusions about what the story is. We're working through the process of figuring out how to tell that story in an automated way to expose that value to a non-sophisticated operator.
Wow, great. And Brian, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of going along with what Tony says. I think for a lot of the experiences and games, obviously being early, if someone's paying, $50, $20, $30 for an experience, to be able to utilize, cognitive to figure out how to make it better and more engaging, so that consumer is more likely to purchase your next title is awesome.
Yeah.
For us, really. We've got there's an advertiser we're talking to now that's putting on 360 video together, 5 or 6 minutes long, and they want to promote it. And for us, 5 or 6 minutes, no, that's not going to really work out.
It's a long
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about 15 or 30 seconds, and let's figure out where we should send users after that. Is the video living on YouTube? Is it living on one of the other, kind of portals where content lives? And what's kind of the best way to get that distribution, do that distribution effectively, or get that just content distributed? So for us, it's okay. We see a much higher completion rate on a 15-second spot as opposed to a 30-second spot. We're also able to put a 2D video in a static 360 environment. So, what are the view-through rates, completion rates for utilizing a standard 2D video that exists, in a computer graphics type environment?
And that's trackable, right?
And that is trackable in terms of completion rate.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily focused on gaze or heat mapping, only because it is so early, and advertisers aren't necessarily iterating or optimizing based on that.
Yeah. All right, so Elizabeth, to talk about the relationship with Five and product design, the end pipeline. Does the work that you do with Five extend into or influence the design of a vehicle?
Absolutely, it does. That's really the point of what we're doing. Like Tony said, it's the value proposition. The thing I think is interesting is we get different data, and it's richer, better data. So we at Ford Motor Company, we are not hungry for data itself. There's a lot of data floating around the company that you can analyze in different ways.
Right.
But what's so special, I think, about VR and AR, and particular the way we use Five, is because it's holistic, the data that we get is complete in the representation of the things that we know we can do really well.
Okay.
So we've actually analyzed what can we look at in the immersive space and what will give us like a false positive or negative, just a wrong result because of the technology or, the one-off of being immersed or whatever. So we have a good understanding of what we can study and get accurate results. So I think the data that we get is much more complete and better. And I think the new horizons out there are more about the experience for the user. So we can understand what the customer sees now, but instead of just saying, look at that and tell me if you like it, now we're putting it in the context of a much bigger experience. And because the automotive industry is changing so much with, semi-autonomous and autonomous vehicle development and conventional vehicle development, there's a lot more call for what you're going to do inside the space of the vehicle.
Okay. Wow, great. So I guess at this point, before we open up for Q&A, what I wanted to ask is, in terms of your advice or to any developers out there, especially VR developers specifically, because we're here, what I hear a lot when I ask about product design specifically in VR is, how do you know that that's what the user wants? And the usual answer is that kind of a user testing process that is not that sophisticated, that is usually conducted within a closed department generally. So would you have advice to anyone interested in implementing a more strategic research plan in their own VR pipeline development?
So if they're using VR, that's a great step forward. But I also do see a lot of legacy research techniques being applied to the visualizations. So people standing around with clipboards and recording tape, and that sort of thing, alongside a virtual reality experience. I think that there's a lot of quantitative data that can be measured from these experiences. You've got an advanced 3D engine running a lot of these experiences, and data can be extracted and replayed and leveraged in different ways. And I think that you need to rethink the way that you do your consumer and internal research when you're thinking about leveraging VR. And that includes the qualitative elements, including polling your customer and asking them questions, and then also recording the data in the background. So, yeah, my advice would be, obviously take a look at our technology, but basically it gives you that capacity to record all that data from those experiences, and ideally, leverage it in your research.
Great. And you're saying, and your company is also moving towards automated solutions as well in that capacity to collect data?
So I mean, we offer an SDK. It gets used for games, entertainment, enterprise use cases, that sort of thing. In terms of our roadmap and where we're headed, it really comes down to a lot of work that we're looking in terms of machine learning, AI elements of like what we want to do, identifying trends, being able to automate the insights, because I think we have a lot of data, and I think that a lot of that can be leveraged to identify the important aspects of what is going on inside of a particular scene without necessarily requiring a sophisticated operator to figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Brian.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's we're kind of in a unique portion of the ecosystem. I mean, for us, the advice is really see what's out there in terms of duration or type of content. We make it fairly easy and turnkey to kind of dip your toe in the water, and that's really it. We don't really have tons of advice in terms of optimization or research prior to creating content. We're still figuring that out.
Yeah.
We do have a lot of data, but the types of content and the types of advertisers getting involved runs the gamut, where we do have some best practices, but we're still learning a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Elizabeth.
So one of the things when we were laying the foundation for what became 5 was we developed tenets of immersion. So we decided what was a good experience, what could we do, what would the technology allow us to do accurately. And the goal has always been to simulate any potential reality. So if we go back to the original before we change things, the ROI, if we are studying something that we've presented in error, we've hurt ourselves. We haven't helped anything. So I think it's important to know, like, play your strengths, to know what the technology can do for you and your company, where you're at in the industry at that point, and map, so you're not doing tape and clipboards anymore, what the strategy is going forward so that you're being extremely efficient. And then the last thing,
So having a research purpose.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'd say that is often overlooked, and I think the downfall of many systems, is considering the culture. So like the culture of a big monster multinational like Ford isn't really conducive to strapping some stuff on your body and getting in the immersive environment initially.
Right.
Now it is,
Yeah.
but knowing the culture and the way that people work and understanding what they do and why they do it and why they love what they used to do will help in how you get data, collect it, understand it, and actually get the people that are doing that job engaged and excited about what the possibilities are for the efficiencies they could get and the understanding that the data would give to them.
Right. Great. All right. So I'm going to open it up to Q&A. If you have a question, just raise your hand and a mic will approach you. So any questions to any of our panelists? And they can be broad, but they can also be as specific, because we're dealing with data, we're dealing with research. So go for it.
I come from like the e-learning space, mostly for corporate, and like even today, the idea of context developing scenarios is insanely new to a lot of instructional designers in the corporate world. And then data or connecting and reviewing the training to see if it actually did anything. Is there a new skill that somebody learned? Nobody does that as well. But today I'm noticing in the virtual reality space, everyone does talk about simulating reality, and then also which is the context, and then also what you're talking about here is these data points. Do you think virtual reality forces that when an organization would take it on? Is like, okay, you're faced now with representing context, like you have to, and then also you have to analyze that.
So I can add to that. The interesting thing about immersive virtual reality, if you do this holistic view, like in our case of a vehicle, and you bring in people across the organization that have different skill sets and different minds, and then you bring in leaders who are responsible for a broad brush, what ends up happening is nobody is constrained to looking at or understanding, or not necessarily understanding, but looking at the things that somebody wants to spoon feed you that you should go look at. You have an entire vehicle with an engine and a powertrain or whatever that you can go and study in the way that you want. So I think the interesting thing is what ends up happening is people gravitate toward the things they know, and then they'll look at the other areas. So it really has allowed us to blossom and open up in the way that we do our development, because we're not, like in the old days, we'd have Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoints, and we'd say, look at this section, and here's the data on the spreadsheet that says whether it's good or bad. And then now here's the next section, and here's the new proposal, and it was full of numbers.
There's implied bias in
Yes.
the preparation of that data,
Absolutely, there is, and that
Yeah.
was one of the use cases for the development and like the funding of our lab was the CTO got in, and he started immersed, and he started sticking his face through the data, like with the headset. And he was like doing this, looking around, and we're like, we can give you a tool that allows you the sections, so you don't have to use your face. But that's how it got started, because he didn't want to be spoon-fed the information. He wanted to understand, explore and understand. So the amount of data is fantastic. So I think you're hitting on something really important.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. Well, I think we have time for one more question. Anyone? Then let's. I mean, great, Dave.
I'm like, you guys must know each other.
No, I have no idea who he is.
Yeah, right.
One question is how important is, like, right now you're looking at data and you're gathering it so it can be analyzed. What about using that data in real time? Like in games you have dynamic difficulty. I mean, obviously even cars you have sensors in case there's going to be a problem. But how much of what you do involves dynamically modifying in real time something that's happening based on data collection?
Do you dynamically change the design of your cars in real time?
We do. We do with manufacturing process capability.
Yeah.
We dynamically, we'll say this vehicle, we can 3 Sigma or 6 Sigma produce. And then we'll vary the body side and look at the propagation of the design. But what we're not doing is pulling and morphing on surfaces. And the reason why we don't do that is because anything we do, back to the tenets of immersion, has to represent a potential reality. If you start pulling and morphing, you've lost that connection, and we have no idea if what you're doing has any potential to be built or made. So we're very, very clear on that. But if we do change the data by looking at tolerance stack up, we have data that says we could build that. Is this acceptable to the customer, yes or no?
Nice. Please join me in thanking Elizabeth,
Yep.
Tony, and Brian.
Yep.